I'm Dave Malecki, and I'm training for a Toastmasters speech. The title of the speech is 12 Presidents. I hope you enjoy it. I was born during the latter part of the presidency of Dwight David Eisenhower, and he was the 34th president, I believe. And there's been 12 presidents during my lifetime, counting President-elect Trump, who will take office in a couple months from now. And I don't really remember anything at all about Dwight David Eisenhower because I was too young. Next president after Dwight David Eisenhower was John Kennedy. Now, I do remember a little bit about the presidency of John Kennedy. The main thing I remember there was his funeral. It interfered with my watching cartoons one morning. Next president after John Kennedy was Lyndon Johnson. I learned about Lyndon Johnson when I was in kindergarten, when the kindergarten teacher explained Lyndon Johnson was the president and pointed to us and said, "Someday you could be president." Well, that was before I understood math, so I believed her. The president after Johnson was Richard Nixon. I do remember the transition between Johnson and Nixon and the election a little bit, in fact. During that time frame, there was quite a bit of social upheaval with the Vietnam War going on, some demonstrations, and actually some race riots. We lived near a highway in Michigan, and I remember seeing the Michigan National Guard headed toward Detroit during some of the upheaval. But as far as the actual election itself, I just remember it happened, and it was going to be Nixon versus Humphrey. Okay, the presidency of Richard Nixon I remember quite a bit. The thing about Nixon was a lot of stuff happened during the years that he was president, and he used to do a lot of speeches on TV, and those were a big deal back in those days. Now, one speech my father couldn't watch because he and my wife went out on a date for something, and he assigned me the task of recording the speech. Well, I did that. During the speech, my sisters and I got in a little argument, and I got in trouble for that when my father listened to the recording later. So he wasn't the only person that got in trouble. Nixon wasn't the only person that got in trouble during the Watergate era for speeches that were recorded. The president after Nixon was from Michigan, actually, which is where I grew up, and Gerald Ford. He actually wasn't elected president, he was appointed president. He was the only person that held the office of presidency that wasn't elected. So he was reasonably popular being from Michigan and all, and Ford was defeated for re-election by Jimmy Carter. That occurred late during my high school years. I remember we did a mock election during there to re-elect President Ford, but obviously that didn't happen. The thing about Jimmy Carter is that was essentially most of my college years was when Jimmy Carter was president, and quite a few dramatic events during his presidency. And when in the next election, when it was Carter versus Reagan, that was my first chance to vote. So I was in college then, and I cast my first ballot during that election. Reagan was president for 8 years, which is quite a while, and those 8 years covered the end of my college career and my trip visit out to New York, relocation to New York, and my first few years working here as a software engineer. There's 3 things I want you to remember from this speech. First off, I'm an avid bicyclist. The second thing is I'm a resourceful software engineer. And the third thing is I'm a centrist. Okay, after President Reagan, there was President Bush. And I don't really remember a lot about President Bush's administration other than the war. But during that time frame, I was heavily into motorcycling. So that was my main activity. Didn't do as much bicycling then, but did a lot of motorcycling. And that was probably the peak of my motorcycling experience. I got back into bicycling more once Bill Clinton was elected. So the thing about Bill Clinton is that's when I met my wife bicycle ride actually. And we were married under Clinton, and so quite a bit happened in my lifetime, and during the time of the Clinton administration, and I look back at that fondly. The president after Clinton was George W. Bush, and the thing I remember about George W. Bush is I had to find a new job. So I had found another job here in the Rochester area as a software engineer. And my wife and I were quite active cyclists, but we also were triathletes. So we used to do a bunch of triathlons. And I did my last triathlon under George W. Bush's administration. So I haven't been doing triathlons for quite a while now. The thing I remember about George W. Bush and respected him for was that he was a bicyclist. And he actually favored a mountain bike, which I do. So it's my favorite form of bicycling, and I respect him greatly for that. After George W. Bush, there was President Obama. And under President Obama, I joined Toastmasters actually, and got my current job at my current company, Harris Corporation. And it's been a long 8 years under President Obama, and now there's going to be a new President Trump. The thing about presidents since Clinton are that they are all the same generation as me. They are all baby boomers, where baby boomers define as someone born between 1946 and 1964. President after Trump may not be a baby boomer anymore, might be in the next generation. It could be a Gen Xer, could even be a millennial. So this is for you millennials out here. Someday you could be president. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed my speech.